In 2024, several countries are experiencing a catastrophic freefall at an astonishing pace that's hard to fathom. Hyperinflation has soared into double and even triple digits. Unemployment rates are skyrocketing, and essential resources such as food, water, and fuel have become luxuries beyond reach. This predicament transcends mere tough times. These nations are teetering on the brink of collapse, grappling with a precarious mix of political instability, economic turmoil, and intense social unrest. We're counting down the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now. Nations that were once promising but now teeter on the edge, backed by startling statistics and the underlying causes behind this decline. Global unrest and civil strife are at unprecedented levels, fueled by a complex web of failing economies, climate change impacts, and humanitarian crises. Some of these countries have witnessed their currencies plummet by as much as 90%, while civil order is rapidly disintegrating. What factors are propelling these nations into chaos, and is there a possibility for them to recover from the brink? We're about to unveil the top 10 nations at risk and the unsettling forces driving their swift decline. Before we dive into this critical analysis, ensure you subscribe to my channel and stay tuned to discover which countries are battling for survival and the reasons behind their failures. Don't miss these eye-opening revelations. Number 1. Lebanon. Lebanon's current situation paints a bleak portrait of a nation in economic freefall. Hyperinflation in Lebanon has surged to nearly 190% as of 2024, leading to alarming price hikes for essentials like food, medicine, and fuel. The Lebanese lira has lost over 95% of its value since the onset of the economic crisis, decimating the purchasing power of citizens to nearly non-existent levels. Basic items that were once within reach, like bread, milk, and cooking oil, have become nearly unattainable for a significant portion of the population. A typical grocery trip that might have cost a few hundred lira a couple of years ago now runs into the millions, underscoring the severity of Lebanon's economic collapse. The banking sector has also suffered tremendously, with billions of dollars in citizen deposits evaporating from banks, triggering widespread outrage and frequent protests as individuals attempt to access their savings, often to no avail. Unemployment in Lebanon has skyrocketed to over 30%, with more than 75% of the population now living below the poverty line. Economic instability, exacerbated by a lack of essential reforms, has propelled the country into a vicious cycle of unrest. Political infighting, sectarian divides, and governmental paralysis further complicate the situation as the government struggles to maintain social order or implement necessary changes. Lebanon's challenges are compounded by external pressures. Its dependence on foreign imports, especially for fuel and essential goods, has left the country susceptible to global market fluctuations and foreign currency shortages. As hope in the state's ability to recover wanes, migration rates are climbing, with many citizens seeking stability elsewhere. Yet for those unable to leave, daily life becomes an arduous fight for survival. Amid these unprecedented challenges, Lebanon's outlook remains grim, positioning it among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now, in a desperate search for solutions to avert further decline. Number 2. Venezuela. Venezuela's economic crisis has morphed into a cautionary tale of hyperinflation and economic disintegration. In 2024, inflation rates skyrocketed past 400%, rendering the bolivar almost worthless as a currency. Everyday items have become so exorbitantly priced that even the most basic groceries require stacks of cash. To illustrate, purchasing a loaf of bread could easily consume a month's salary for many. This staggering inflation has ignited an exodus of over 7 million Venezuelans, one of the largest migration crises in contemporary history, as people flee in search of stability and survival. For those who remain, life is an unending struggle. Power outages are commonplace, with electricity available only intermittently in numerous areas. Water shortages are frequent, forcing entire communities to rely on unsafe sources, while food scarcity drives citizens to the brink of desperation. Government-imposed price controls, intended to keep costs manageable, have backfired, resulting in empty store shelves and spawning black market networks that exploit the desperate. The country's dependency on oil exports has only exacerbated its vulnerability, with oil revenue collapsing alongside declining production rates due to outdated infrastructure and insufficient investment. Ironically, Venezuela possesses some of the largest oil reserves globally, a former source of immense wealth that, instead of fostering prosperity, have become symbols of a squandered fortune. The government's inability to diversify its revenue sources has created a near-apocalyptic environment for millions, where survival is a daily concern. Venezuela's dramatic fall from affluence to crisis firmly cements its status among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now, serving as a striking reminder of how mismanagement and corruption can devastate even the most resource-rich nations. Number 3. Haiti. Haiti's ongoing crisis starkly illustrates how political instability and natural disasters can ravage a country. Approximately 60% of Haitians survive on less than $2.50 a day, with an increasing number slipping deeper into poverty due to an inflation rate exceeding 20% in 2024. Life in Haiti, particularly in the capital, Port-au-Prince, has become a daily struggle. Gang violence dominates much of the city, rendering it nearly impossible for the government to maintain control or for residents to live securely. The rule of law has deteriorated, with many neighborhoods under the sway of armed groups, affecting not just safety, but also access to essential goods and services. Resources are scarce in Haiti, with severe shortages in healthcare, clean water, and sanitation. The public healthcare system is barely functional, plagued by shortages of medicines, equipment, and medical personnel. This lack of healthcare infrastructure has rendered the population vulnerable to disease outbreaks, which worsen in the absence of clean water. Nearly half of Haitians lack access to safe drinking water, and sanitation services are often unavailable. Compounding these issues is Haiti's vulnerability to natural disasters, from earthquakes to hurricanes. Recent years have witnessed frequent storms that not only damage infrastructure, but also displace thousands, intensifying the humanitarian crisis. The country's frail economy cannot support recovery efforts, leaving most citizens trapped in a cycle of disaster and poverty. Adding insult to injury, international aid is often obstructed by corruption and political infighting, limiting the effectiveness of relief efforts. Haiti's combination of political instability, economic hardship, gang violence, and natural disasters places it among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now. For many Haitians, hope for a stable future remains elusive as daily survival becomes increasingly precarious. Number 4. Myanmar. Myanmar's crisis has devolved into one of the most complex humanitarian disasters in Southeast Asia. Since the military coup in 2021, violence has surged, and today, 1 in 4 people require humanitarian aid, an astonishing statistic that underscores the country's deepening plight. The Burmese kyat has plummeted, and inflation has surged into double digits, rendering essentials like food and fuel nearly luxuries for most citizens. For a population already grappling with poverty, daily survival has morphed into a constant struggle. Sanctions imposed by the international community in response to the coup have severely restricted Myanmar's economic activities, resulting in dwindling trade and investment, rising unemployment, and intensified poverty. Myanmar's reliance on imports, particularly for fuel and food, means these sanctions have had a devastating impact, with severe price hikes compounding the economic strain. Meanwhile, internal conflict has escalated, with military clashes and resistance movements spreading across multiple regions. This internal violence has displaced over 1 million people, pushing many into temporary camps where basic needs remain unmet. Recent natural disasters have further compounded the crisis. Flooding during the 2023 monsoon season displaced thousands and destroyed homes and crops, further straining Myanmar's already fragile infrastructure. Humanitarian aid workers face immense challenges, with limited access to conflict zones leaving vulnerable populations isolated and without support. Life in Myanmar has become precarious, with security, stability, and basic services rapidly eroding. Economic hardship, political violence, and environmental disasters have placed Myanmar among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now. For millions, this once promising nation is now in a freefall, with no signs of stabilization on the horizon. Number 5. Sudan. Sudan's crisis stands as one of the world's most severe humanitarian disasters, fueled by ongoing civil conflict, economic collapse, and environmental catastrophes. Since the outbreak of violence between rival factions in 2023, over 4 million people have been displaced, forced to flee their homes in search of safety. Inflation has skyrocketed past 200%, making Sudan's economy one of the most volatile globally. Basic goods are out of reach for many, and food prices have soared, driven partly by recent floods that ravaged much of the country's agricultural land. These floods, combined with ongoing droughts in other areas, have resulted in crop failures and severe food shortages, leaving large swaths of the population food insecure. Sudan's government has lost control over vast regions, with many areas dominated by militias and rebel groups that impose their own rules and restrictions on daily life. This lack of governmental authority has created a lawless environment where violence and uncertainty prevail. The conflict has led to widespread infrastructure damage, including the destruction of schools, hospitals, and essential services, leaving civilians in increasingly dire conditions. Adding to the chaos, international sanctions and limited foreign aid access have stunted recovery efforts, leaving the population to fend for themselves in a country where hope is dwindling. Sudan's combination of humanitarian catastrophe, economic instability, and conflict places it firmly among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now, as millions struggle to survive amidst the chaos. Number 6. Syria. Syria's ongoing civil war, which erupted in 2011, has evolved into one of the most devastating conflicts in modern history. With nearly 14 million people in need of humanitarian assistance in 2024, the repercussions of this protracted war continue to resonate. Syria's economy has suffered catastrophic decline, with an inflation rate surpassing 200%, pushing many households to the brink of starvation. Millions lack access to clean water, healthcare, and basic sanitation, as infrastructure has crumbled under the weight of war. The conflict has resulted in massive displacement, with over 6 million people forced to flee the country, seeking refuge in neighboring nations and beyond. For those who remain, life is characterized by fear, uncertainty, and deprivation. The ongoing violence has created a fragile security situation, with periodic escalations in fighting leaving civilians caught in the crossfire. The government's focus on military solutions has overlooked the pressing humanitarian needs of the population, leaving many without access to essential services. Reconstruction efforts have been stymied by economic sanctions and international isolation, further complicating the prospects for recovery. The Syrian pound has lost more than 90% of its value, and the country's infrastructure is in ruins. Despite international attempts at diplomatic solutions, the path to peace remains elusive, with the humanitarian situation continuing to deteriorate. Syria's enduring conflict and suffering place it among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now, as millions endure a harsh reality with little hope for improvement. Number 7. Afghanistan. Afghanistan's plight has taken a grim turn since the Taliban's return to power in 2021. The humanitarian crisis is staggering, with 20 million people in urgent need of assistance. Economic collapse, exacerbated by international sanctions, has rendered the Afghan economy nearly paralyzed, with inflation soaring above 25% and food insecurity reaching alarming levels. The United Nations warns that 95% of Afghans are now unable to meet their basic food needs. The education sector has also suffered tremendously, particularly for girls and young women. Restrictions on education have left a generation of Afghan children deprived of learning opportunities, further stunting the nation's future. As the economy continues to crumble, many families are forced into desperate situations, resorting to selling their possessions or even their children to survive. In rural areas, ongoing conflict and instability have displaced millions, compounding the humanitarian crisis. Access to healthcare has plummeted, with many clinics closing due to lack of funding and security concerns. As international aid dwindles, the situation becomes increasingly dire for Afghan citizens. With no immediate end in sight for the crisis, Afghanistan's place among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need for global attention and action. Number 8. Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, is experiencing one of the most complex humanitarian crises globally. Years of conflict, political instability, and rampant corruption have left the DRC grappling with profound economic challenges. With over 27 million people in need of assistance, the DRC faces staggering food insecurity, with 1 in 3 people suffering from malnutrition. The country's ongoing violence, particularly in the eastern regions, has resulted in widespread displacement, with millions forced to flee their homes. Inflation has reached 20%, further straining the already precarious situation for millions of Congolese citizens. The DRC is rich in resources, yet decades of mismanagement and exploitation have stunted its economic growth. The mining sector, which could serve as an economic backbone, is fraught with challenges, including violence, human rights abuses, and environmental degradation. This wealth, paradoxically, has become a curse for the population, as conflict over resources continues to fuel violence and instability. Access to basic services such as healthcare and education is severely limited, particularly in rural areas. Many communities lack adequate healthcare facilities, leading to high mortality rates from preventable diseases. Ongoing violence and conflict obstruct humanitarian access, further complicating the crisis. The DRC's combination of violence, corruption, and economic instability positions it among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now, as millions face an uncertain and perilous future. Number 9. Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's struggle with hyperinflation and economic mismanagement has persisted for decades. In 2024, inflation rates have surpassed 500%, leading to soaring prices and declining living standards. Basic commodities such as food and fuel are becoming increasingly scarce, and the national currency is rapidly losing value. The situation has forced many Zimbabweans to turn to bartering, as cash becomes nearly worthless. Despite the country's rich resources, including agriculture and mining, corruption and political instability have hindered progress. Years of poor governance have stunted economic growth, and the government has struggled to implement effective policies to alleviate poverty. Unemployment remains at a staggering 80%, and many citizens lack access to essential services such as healthcare and education. The agricultural sector, once the backbone of the economy, has seen a dramatic decline due to land reform policies that drove many skilled farmers away. Amid these challenges, the population's resilience remains palpable as communities come together to support one another in their struggles. However, the outlook remains bleak, with many Zimbabweans unsure of what the future holds. As the country continues to grapple with economic collapse, Zimbabwe's status among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now serves as a striking reminder of the consequences of mismanagement and the urgent need for reform. Number 10. Yemen. Yemen stands as one of the world's most dire humanitarian crises, with over 80% of the population requiring assistance in 2024. The ongoing civil war, which erupted in 2014, has resulted in severe infrastructure destruction, economic collapse, and widespread suffering. Over 4 million Yemenis have been displaced from their homes, and the country faces one of the worst famines in recent history, with millions on the brink of starvation. The economy has disintegrated, with inflation rates exceeding 30%. Basic necessities, including food, clean water, and healthcare, are in scarce supply. Humanitarian access is often obstructed by ongoing conflict, limiting aid organizations' ability to deliver assistance to those in need. The collapse of the healthcare system has left many without access to medical care, exacerbating the suffering caused by malnutrition and preventable diseases. International efforts to broker peace have largely faltered, and the conflict continues to escalate, drawing in regional powers and deepening the crisis. Yemen's combination of prolonged violence, humanitarian catastrophe, and economic despair firmly places it among the 10 fastest collapsing countries in the world right now, as millions endure unimaginable hardships. The world is witnessing an alarming surge in countries facing existential crises, marked by escalating violence, economic collapse, and widespread suffering. Each of these nations grapples with its own unique challenges, but common threads of political instability, economic mismanagement, and social unrest weave through their narratives. The plight of these countries serves as a poignant reminder of the urgent need for global attention and action. As we continue to follow these crises, it's crucial to recognize the humanity behind the statistics and the resilience of the individuals and communities fighting for survival amid despair. Stay informed about these pressing issues and their implications for global stability. By shedding light on these crises, we can contribute to awareness and ultimately to positive change for those in desperate need. Thanks for watching. If you found this video insightful, subscribe to my channel for more global stories. Drop a like, share, and let us know your thoughts below.